Email here from Ian in Fareham. Dear, not been in the top 100 boys' names since 1996, and ditto.
Is that us?
This is from Ian in Fareham.
Okay.
So presumably
Maybe he has
Mark
neither.
and Simon, and none of those, they're not trendy anymore. They're
Ooh.
not Chad.
What is now?
I know, buckwheat or something. I don't know.
Wheat.
I wish to take issue with Mark's rant last week where he derided, quote, conspiracy theory wingnuts.
Yeah.
The issue is not over bashing conspiracy theories. Go for it, comrades.
Okay.
The issue is that as a fan of Aaron Sorkin's The West Wing, I am a wingnut. It is what we are called. See the excellent West Wing weekly podcast.
So West Wing fans are called
Wingnuts.
Wingnut. Oh.
I also suspect that the intersection of the true wingnuts and conspiracy theorists contains an extremely small number of people. Most likely, zero. So if Mark could find another invective, we would be most grateful.
Okay. I didn't know that you're a huge West Wing fan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did you know that West Wing fans were called wingnuts?
I don't think I did. I do know about the West Wing weekly podcast, which is fantastic.
Okay.
But I don't think I knew it was a wingnut thing.
Okay, so but conspiracy theory wingnut. If you look up wingnut on the Urban Dictionary, wingnut, ideological extremist from either side of the political spectrum who unquestioningly repeats any and all propaganda and or conspiracy theories propagated by their side of the political spectrum, no matter how unlikely. So that was the context in which I was using it, but it sounds like we need to use another word because I don't want to say conspiracy theory West Wing fans, because West Wing fans are on the side of all that is righteous and good.
I think that is true. And the other day I played Brothers in Arms on Greatest Hits Radio at drive time. Anyway, and the opening, which is 6.5 minutes, I think 6 minutes 40.
Yeah.
And that piece of music was used in the Two Cathedrals episode, which I think is the one of West Wing, where Martin Sheen is enraged with the Almighty because his secretary and wonderful woman has been killed in a car crash, and he rants at God in the cathedral, stubs a cigarette out as an act of defiance, and that whole thing has got Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits going on underneath. So it's full of wonderful, wonderful things. So do you need an alternative to wingnut? Conspiracy theory what?
Yes, we need another word to explain. Because the other, Peter Jackson used to, his film company was called Wingnut because I think when he was at school that was his nickname. But yes, so we need another word that doesn't mean West Wing fans or Peter Jackson, something to describe people who think that aeroplanes leave chemtrails, which they don't.
Our guest today is the director of the new Pixar film Elemental. His name is Peter Sohn. His early work includes 2009's short Partly Cloudy, 2015's Good Dinosaur. You might also recognize his voice because he's a voiceover artist, as you're about to hear. He's Emile in Ratatouille, Squishy in Monsters University, and Socks in Lightyear. Anyway, you'll hear my chat with Peter Sohn after this clip.
Yo, Ember!
Yo, Claude, can't talk, in a hurry. And don't let my dad catch you out here again.
What? Come on, he doesn't like my landscaping?
Ugh.
Anyway, June Bloom is coming, and you just got to be my date. 'Cause check it out. I'm all grown up. And I smell good. Ow! My queen.
Sorry, buddy. Elements don't mix.
Flame!
Gotta go.
Come on, go to the festival with me. You never leave this part of town.
That's because everything I need is right here. Plus, the city isn't made with fire people in mind. Sorry, but it'd take an act of God to get me across that bridge.
An act of God or an act of Claude?
And that's a clip from the new Pixar movie Elemental. I'm delighted to say I've been joined by its director and co-writer, Peter Sohn. Hello, Peter. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Is it exciting now, this moment in a director's life, when your new movie, which I think has been like 7 years in the making, is about to be launched? Are you confident? How are you feeling?
It's a big bag of emotions. There is excitement, there's pride, there's fear, there's, anxiousness. There's just so much going on. And each one of those things hits you at different times.
What does your gut tell you?
My gut that tells me that I'm just super proud of all the work that this crew did. Like it's easy to say about a crew doing work, but they gave so much of themselves, and so I'm really proud.
I'd like to do this in order so that when people come in and they watch your movie, of course, before your movie starts, there is the famous Pixar short.
Yes.
So tell us what we see first of all, because it is, of course, delightful. Just tell us the first thing that we see.
Yes, and the first thing is a short called Carl's Date, and it takes place from characters from the movie Up, and it pushes something that, is very emotional for us at Pixar because of how much of the heart of that original movie centered around this love of Carl Fredricksen's life. And then right after that comes our film.
Yes. And so just to say, it's a lovely just way of saying thank you to Ed Asner, who's passed, of course.
Yes, that's right.
And am I right in saying that in the original Up, the famous scene with all the balloons,
yes,
that was you?
Yes, that's right. The director just asked, there were no script pages other than we need to figure out how to lift this house up with balloons. And I spent some time with, just drawing late into the night. You're just drawing all these ideas. And then I presented it. Then I found this piece of music and to try to make it more lifty if possible. But that was it,
Lifty music. Okay.
Yeah.
So introduce us to Elemental then and the interesting and very personal ideas behind us. Just take us into your film.
Yeah, I mean, it's this wild, fantastical world of elements, and making characters out of earth, fire, water, and air. And centering on this fire family and this young woman that grows up in this city and how this fire woman connects with this water guy. And it connects to my life in terms of my parents were immigrants. They came to a new city. And I thought this metaphor of these diverse elements totally connected to that. And then I also married someone that wasn't Korean. I'm Korean, and that caused a lot of trouble in my family. My grandmother's dying words were like, "Marry Korean," and she passed away, and it was just this. It caused a lot of culture clash, and that really inspired these fun ideas of how these different elements could mix or not mix.
So just on the element thing, did you at all ever think of, because you've used the traditional elements, there are, of course, 118 elements
right.
In the periodic table.
Yes.
Did you ever think of doing hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium?
Yes. Oh, my gosh. How it started was in school, and I would look at that and it looked like an apartment complex to me, those blocks and everything. Yeah. And I would make fun of copper and like, be careful of helium, they're gassy. All these little characters became something. Once we got to the radioactive world, boy, those characters were really difficult to start making fun of. And so I wanted a gateway and sort of boiling it down. But yeah, there was definitely H2O, characters and all of that.
So can you just give us an insight, before we get into the characters that you've actually used, the process of you having that idea?
Yeah.
And over that 7-year process,
yes.
Do you go to someone and say, how about this? I mean, this is your second directorial picture. What happens in the Pixar process? How does it get made?
And so this one was an unusual path. Usually you're pitching 3 ideas and one gets selected and then becomes developed. This started off from an anecdote of my parents and thanking them in New York. And that emotional moment, a lot of the folks there at Pixar said, "Hey, that's your movie." And so it was sort of like already got on a path. From there, it's just so lonely work of research and trying to develop the world and the characters to a certain sort of rough state. Then once that rough state, you get to it, that's when you start pitching that more and more. That's when it becomes sort of the show. And you are pitching the heart of it. And the main question that was at that time was, what if fire and water could fall in love? That was the question that was hopefully intriguing enough to get people on board. And then it did. And more people got on board, writers and story artists, and we started developing the story. Then soon after that, you would build a screening, and then you would show the studio a rough version of the movie. And then if that had enough potential to it, then you would start ramping more artists to start building the film out. And then you would do that process again and again and again of building up these rough reels, exploring different ideas and exploring the characters and trying to find the fun and the emotion of it until you get to a place where they lock it down, and then you really essentially go Hollywood, where it's the virtual sets are being built, virtual lighting and virtual characters are being made, and you're recording actors and you're really building it up from there to get the final product.
So was it always going to be, some people will have been struck by the way you described the story, and it obviously has elements of the Romeo and Juliet story. Yes. Was that always, if you're going to do a fire and water story, is that always going to be at the heart of it?
Yeah, it was the beginning. It was that first little circle, the first little nugget of this thing. But because the heart of it was thanking my parents, that it formed a triangle. It was a love story between a young woman and a guy, but then a daughter and a father. And that became the main core. And everything grew out from there.
So at the beginning of the movie, the Fire parents arrive in Element City. So is that kind of your folks arriving in New York?
My parents were not married when they came separately. And so but it was definitely trying to honor, we talked to so many other crew members of their stories too. And it was about honoring all of that.
So in your movie, why have the Fire parents left their home and come to Element City?
There was environmental dangers for them that really, forced them out of their home and their identity, essentially.
Now, I've only seen the film once, and I didn't have the ability to pause, obviously, because I'm seeing it in a proper theatre.
Yeah.
Is the father wearing like metal trousers?
Yes, he is. Yes. Yeah, most of all the characters, all the clothing is made of metal, yeah.
You must, I guess this is the kind of film that will repay a second watch just to see so many of your jokes that we might miss.
Yeah, there's so many ideas jam-packed into this film, and which is a great reason to see it in the theater. There's so many details that, we made for the big screen, and so you could catch them. But yes, there's a lot of story going on in the background.
So Ember and Wade are the two characters at the heart of this story. Wade is a drip, as other people have said, really, but we like him and we love Ember, of course. She's a very fiery character. Tell us, because you're a voiceover artist yourself.
Right.
You're a voice artist, and we've heard your voice in other movies, so you know instinctively what you're looking for. What did you want what did you want these characters to sound like?
There were two pieces there. Each one was a character performance that were very specific, and then an elemental aspect. And the first thing for Ember, wanting someone that could be fierce and strong, but then also tender with a father character, so that those were the stakes of the film, was this love for the father. So I needed that. But then, Leah Lewis, what I found with her that was interesting elementally was she has a smoky voice. And that sort of added that piece of it, For Wade, we needed someone that could not only just be empathetic and reach out with their voice to be emotional, but also to be cool and go with the flow. And not only that, he cries a lot in this movie. He's water, of course. He's leaking everywhere. And how do you find fun with someone like with that much tearing up? And Mamadou did that incredibly, both by allowing us to being vulnerable enough for us to jump with him, but at the same time have a lot of fun.
Obviously, in a kind of real action film, you're looking for chemistry between your two lead characters. Is it different in a Pixar film? Is it different in animation?
Yes,
or does there have to be that chemistry which you're hearing?
Yes, it does. You really are hunting for that chemistry. It's done slightly different because you're matching voices together, and you're hearing it and trying to craft it. They didn't record together ever during this time because it was COVID, and so they were separate. And so there's just a lot of work to just record them differently, put them together, and find that electricity. And but it's manufactured in that way. But you are pushing each performer to reach out toward each other. It was ironic. This whole film is about connection, yet the pandemic forced us to not connect. But the whole game of animation is trying to create electricity, a frame by frame, and it was the same with the dialogue.
How much more difficult did the pandemic make this film?
I hated it. Simon, it was the worst. So much of this kind of work is collaborative. Being split like that but there was nothing else to do. We had to do it. And the Pixar tech folks really found a way to allow us to get as close as we could.
I remember there was a period in lockdown when everybody thought that animation was going to be the only thing that we'd see because, of course, the animators were very busy because they could keep carrying on.
And they did. And they really did. And the hours spent on just moving frame by frames was all we could do.
I was wondering, watching this and knowing that a lot of it came out of your history and your story, how much of you put into Ember, and also how much of your father goes into her father, because that father is one exhausted man. He runs that store from first light till last thing before he goes to bed. Is that your dad?
It is my dad. Simon, I will cry in front of you the more I talk about it. I lost him during the making of this thing. And, he had a cough. That's what took him away. And the fact that Bernie is coughing the smoke out definitely hits me in a new way every time I see it. But his work ethic was the thing that I'm so proud of. He came to this country with that work ethic, and he started as a hot dog cart guy in Manhattan. He made nothing, and he built this, life for us with that. And, those hours that you mentioned was his life. We rarely saw him. And anytime he had the chance to do anything, he took us to the movies. But he was asleep through every movie we ever saw because he had worked so hard.
Am I right in saying I think you lost both parents?
That's right. Yes, through it. It was. I'm still going through it. Yeah.
Which must make this movie. I mean, it has an impact for everyone who goes to see it, but for you, this is incredibly personal.
It is. I never thought it would be, and these films take a life of their own, and they start speaking to you. What was crazy was it started speaking in dark ways after I lost my dad, who was the first. And you had to find light again. You're just in this darkness. And, this whole movie its intent was always to be hopeful, but there was moments where hope was gone, and then you find it again. And then surprisingly, when my mom, went, and finishing this film definitely is tied to some piece of closure for sure.
So if this film took 7 years, we need to see some more work from you. We can't wait another 7 years. Have you got other projects in that? You explained the Pixar process earlier.
Yeah.
Have you got other things in the pipeline that we're going to see?
I definitely have ideas that I've going on, but boy, this has been such an emotional. I've just been like, I could use a break.
So maybe some more elements to come.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that'd be great.
Peter Sohn, thank you so much. Very nice to
Thank you, Simon.
Nice
it's been great to talk to you too. Thank you for the great questions.
Peter Sohn, director of Elemental. And we mentioned YouTube earlier, and if you go to YouTube, you can see Peter talking.
And being visibly moved when talking about some of the subjects in it.
I think it's just rare for someone's personal story to become part of the interview. But because it was absolutely woven into the immigrant experience of America, it seemed okay to go there. And I did know that both his parents had passed. But I think he was happy talking about it because it was relevant to the story.
Yeah. Well, I think that interview is one of the perfect examples of, I feel, I like the film much more. I mean, not that I disliked it, but I like it much more after hearing him talk about it. So, as he said, it plays out in Element City. Different elements live alongside each other. There are 4 elements, as you pointed out. In the real world, there are many more. I'm surprised at that point you didn't give him a signed copy of Itch.
How do you know that I didn't?
Oh, no.
No, I actually didn't. I was, of course, tempted to, but I thought that would have been unprofessional.
Itch, which is soon to be coming to Opera Holland Park.
Opera Holland Park.
Did you give him tickets for that?
A few weeks time. If he was still around, I think he would probably have enjoyed it.
So Fire Girl Ember has always thought she would take over her father's shop. Water guy Wade falls in love with her. Can they be together? Can fire and water be together? There are clear parallels with Inside Out, in which we had the personification of personality traits like the numbskulls thing, working inside the head. He has cited elsewhere films like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Moonstruck, You've Got Mail, Amelie, Big Fat Greek Wedding, Big Sick as particular influences on his rom-com elements. And yet, the thing about this is that yes, there is a romantic comedy in there, but he himself said the heart of it was a thank you to his parents. And actually, I think that's the bit that works the best. So on the one hand, there's the metaphor of the diversity of elements as real life diversity. That thing when he said his grandmother said, marry Korean. And he said, and then I didn't.
Her dying words.
I know. It's like,
Wow.
And the idea of the immigrant diaspora, clearly very, very personal. Some of the stuff for me that doesn't work quite so well is, I'm not entirely sure that the way in which the personification of the water guy and the fire guy, it just didn't click for me in the same way that Inside Out did. I thought Inside Out was the best film I saw that year. I spent a lot of time worrying about the design of the water and the design of the fire. So in fact, I found the romance between those things, although I think the metaphorical underpinning is solid, I found that didn't work quite so well. But what does work well is the stuff between her and her father. And I found myself moved to tears, particularly in the final act. I don't want to give anything away, but there is a scene in the final act which I just found myself welling up. And I was thinking when he said the heart of it was thanking my parents, because that is in the film called Elemental, that is the strongest element. And so if the stuff across the elements didn't work quite so well for me, the stuff within the family worked really well. And hearing him talk about it, that kind of makes sense. Because when he talks about the influences for the other elements, he's talking about other films. But when he's talking about the parent stuff, he's talking about himself. And it's interesting that in that interview, the stuff that he's really moved by is talking about, when you were talking about the thing about losing both parents, and he said, my father had a cough. So when the father coughs the smoke, he said, every time I see it, it's a particular, and then he talked about at one point, it took him to a very dark place. And that kind of made sense to me, because hearing that, I went, oh, okay, that's why when I was watching the film, the stuff that was going back there, the romance, was fine, but it's not classic Pixar. But the stuff between her and her father is also worth saying that Carl's Date is lovely, because the simplicity of it, the short film at the beginning.
Yes, the little brief one where we go back into the world of Up.
The simplicity of it is just... that's the treat. And I think that sometimes in the stuff about the romance, there are complexities about why can't fire and water, but the earth, it doesn't quite work for me. But the stuff between her and her dad absolutely worked. And as I said, did make me cry.
What an amazing calling card, though, which is why I mentioned it at the start, to say, you know that bit in Up that
everyone remembers?
Everyone's favourite bit with the balloons. That was you. That was Peter Sohn. Quite incredible. And hopefully it won't take him another 7 years before we get another movie from him. By the way, we will be discussing Mission Impossible.
Yes.
Later on.
Just a moment.
In this podcast. Simon Pegg will be a guest on next week's programme. So we're spreading the Mission Impossible fun.
Yes. Because there's a lot of fun to spread.
Yes. But ads in a moment, Mark. But let's not waste another opportunity to step again into our laughter list.
Let's not.
Which we missed so much last week.
Oh, dear.
I found last week was such a drag without the laughter lift. So let's put that right.
Somehow the show skipped along for me.
I was listening to some of my top U2 tracks to keep me occupied when I was out there in Denmark, which reminds me, this is a joke that works written down and not out loud.
Okay.
Why did U2's lawyer refuse to send them an invoice?
Don't know.
Because he was working pro bono, but it's Bono, and
yes,
so that pro bono doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Anyway, another joke does work. You'll never believe it, Mark. I was in a pub in Showbiz North London last week. Bono and Edge walked in, and the barman looks up and says, Not you two again. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting Bono.
Interrupting Bono?
1, 2, 3, 14! I sent the good lady ceramicist her indoors out to the supermarket. I mean, I obviously didn't, because she's not going to do that kind of thing.
Because also, she'd just say, no, go yourself.
I sent the good lady ceramicist her indoors out to the supermarket last week.
Did you?
She was using,
how did that go?
Not well. She was using my custom U2 sat-nav. She still hasn't found what she's looking for.
Cool.
I should really send it back. The streets have no name, but it is better than the Bonnie Tyler sat-nav. It keeps saying turn around, and every now and then it falls apart.
I thought he was going to say that you ended up lost in France.
Well, that's also...
That would have been a better joke.
No, turn around and every now and then it
falls apart.
Falls apart, that's...
And then you ended up lost in France.
Okay, well, let's add that in.
All right, and then you ended up lost in France.
What's still to come?
Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Back after this.
Lost in France.
Unless you're a Vanguardista, in which case, you're so charming when you make an effort. And we'll be back after this. Correspondence at kermode.mayo.com.
Can I just say one other thing about that Peter Sohn interview? It is so sorry, just because I've been thinking about it a lot, and about the fact that interview really made me think more warmly, no pun intended, about the film. Particularly when it's animation and it takes so long to do. The idea that the spark of melancholy or mournfulness can be kept alive throughout the process. It's almost more extraordinary than you write a drama and then somebody films it. And don't you think there is something really remarkable about how many versions of the finished scene they must have gone through, and yet it still
also
catches him?
The fact that his instant response, because obviously when you do these interviews, it's question I was expecting. Here's the answer you were expecting. When I asked him about the impact of COVID and lockdown, the way he just jumped in and said, I absolutely hated it. And we've asked similar questions to other actors and directors, but that was really passionate.
Yeah, really was. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
it was a very, very fine interview.
Well, thank you. He's a very, very fine director and made it very easy. Anyway, big movie over the next few weeks, I will confidently predict, is called
Mission Impossible:
Impossible
/ Dead Reckoning Part 1.
M.N. thing.
Yeah. Well, yes. What is it? Is it a?
Is it an N slash?
No, there was. What was the other thing you said? It was.
I don't know. It was a QB thing.
A QB thing. Yes. No. So it's a Mission
thing. Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Dead Reckoning Part 1, or just MI7 if you want to be easy. So just to say at the beginning of this, you and I saw this together on consecutive nights. We saw Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And you have already said that one of the things with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is it's seeing it the day after you saw Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Tough.
So MI goes AI.
Ooh, very good.
Thank you very much. So the setup
is... You should put that in your observer column.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you make it the opening line? That's my suggestion.
I'll do that, Simon.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so and I don't want to. I'm not going to do. I don't want to do anything that spoils the film. But essentially, what happens is this time, in the past, Ethan Hunt has gone up against. I mean, most recently, he was having to save the world from nuclear bombs, and there was a thing before that with anyway. So this time, their enemy is an artificial intelligence that has developed its own awareness. It has become self-aware, and it is viral, and it is out there infecting loads and loads of computers. In the pre-credit sequence, because this being a Mission Impossible thing, we start in a submarine, which is in the Bering Strait, and there is a weird thing with a kind of key, a sort of strange key that looks like a kind of like a cruciform shape. And then from there we go, there's a desert thing, and there's a chase across the desert, and there's a shootout in the desert, and there's a findy thing, and then there's Amsterdam, and this is all before the titles come up. But essentially, the enemy that they're up against is everywhere and nowhere, baby. Thank you. You got the everywhere and...
It's everywhere and nowhere, baby. That's where you're at.
Silver lining. And the one thing that you and I said afterwards was, we're going to see a lot of this in the future, aren't we? The AI,
yes, it's going to be it's the new multiverse.
Yes,
it's going to be.
The new multiverse, and in the same way that we'd all seen a bunch of movies in which everything's happening in the multiverse. Now we're going to hold a bunch of movies in which they're AI. So what he has to do, it's a very, very new threat, but it has a very, very old-fashioned key, and in a weird similarity, not echo of, because, in a weird similarity to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the key has two parts. And when the two parts are brought together, something extraordinary will happen, but nobody's quite sure what. And everybody wants to own the entity, not to destroy it, but to own the entity, because it has the power of it can control truth as we know it. So it's a great big AI viral entity that there is a physical key that is in two parts. The two parts are roundabouts in the world. Everyone wants to get hold of it. And in order to do this, our team will have to chase hither and thither.
And yon,
both near and far. I'm going to play a clip because the clip's from sort of fairly late on in the movie, but it is a sequence that everybody has seen because it's been very, very heavily trailered, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yes.
Featuring Simon Pegg, who is going to be your guest on next week's show from Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Here's the clip.
Well, you can see the train, right?
Yes, I see the train. What about it?
And you have a parachute.
Got a parachute? What do you expect me to do?
Well, just, jump.
Just jump?
Yeah.
Benji, it doesn't work like that. I'm not that high. There's ledges sticking out everywhere. I'm gonna hit them before the parachute even opens. Benji, even if I could get the parachute open, I don't know if I can make it across the valley and intercept and land safely on a moving train. Do you copy?
Yes, I copy. Look, I'm just trying to help you, okay? I need you to take a step back and pull yourself together because I am under a lot of pressure right now.
So Simon Pegg will be your guest on next week's show.
And Simon Pegg is in a car.
And Tom Cruise
on a motorbike on top of a cliff.
Top of a cliff, a big rocky cliff with a great big droppy jump in front of him with lots of jaggedy rocks sticking out. Now, this is not a plot spoiler because there has been so much coverage about this and everyone has seen the little featurette. What Tom is going to do is to jump off the cliff on a motorbike in order to intersect with a train, which is where the final act of the film is going to play out. And the stunt was done 6 times, and all 6 times it was done by stuntman Tom Cruise. And if you've seen the piece of, if you haven't seen the piece of footage,
it's worth looking for. It's incredible.
It's just, I mean,
and that is day 1 of the production.
It was. Oh, that was the very first day.
That's the first day of
I didn't know that. Okay. So and they've built, it's a ramp and all the rest of it, but it is actually Tom Cruise on an actual motorbike, actually jumping off the top of this thing and then actually falling and then actually opening a real parachute, actually. And then he does it 6 times because after he's done the first one, he says, I think I let go of the bike a bit early.
Damn, how did that happen?
He just keeps doing it. So here's the thing. You know that when Tom Cruise does an action movie, he is going to go the extra mile. And we were talking before about, whether he'll be remembered, in decades to come as one of the great superstars. And one of the things that he will be remembered for is, are you not entertained? How much more can I do? In a previous Mission Impossible film, there's a scene in which he broke his ankle because he was doing his own stunt. But this really is, even just watching that little thing. And of course, there's a moment when the director, Christopher McQuarrie, is watching it on the thing, and then Tom lands safely, and somebody hugs Christopher McQuarrie because obviously one of the things they were thinking was, please let this go right. Please don't let something terribly wrong happen. So as far as the rest of it's concerned, it is the usual Mission Impossible stuff, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, it's the plot is kind of a lot of join the dots stuff. AI is not new, but it is absolutely of its moment. We're all sort of very concerned about, the robot overlords taking over. So there are sequences involving Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust. There is a teaming up with Hayley Atwell's Light-Fingered Grace, who is a thief, and there's a sequence.
Is Hayley Atwell related to Winifred Atwell, the pianist?
You'd have to ask her. Okay. Ask Simon Pegg when you speak
Simon
to him.
Paul, you could look it up.
And so there's again, talking about stuff that's in the trailer. There's a terrific chase sequence down the Spanish Steps. They actually had the premiere of the film by the Spanish Steps, in which they're in a very little Fiat and they're handcuffed together. Again, weirdly enough, kind of oddly mirroring scenes that are in, I'm not saying mirroring scenes that are in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
But done much better.
But certainly done much more. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny wants you to kind of just, enjoy the old-fashioned, look, it's Harrison Ford and somebody else and they're in the thing. But what this wants you to do is be absolutely on the edge of your seat. Because there's one of the things I like about this film.
And it succeeds.
Is that there is a kind of caper quality to it. So the stuff with the little cars going down those streets, it's kind of got an Italian job feel to it. There's a lot of screwball comedy interaction between. You heard a little bit of it there with Tom Cruise and Simon Pegg. I think when Simon Pegg says, "I'm under a lot of pressure," that it cuts back to Tom Cruise on the top of a mountain with a motorbike. But what makes the film work? Also, there is a terrific performance by Essie Morales, who was so chilling in Ozark, which I absolutely loved, who here is Gabriel, who is described as the entity's chosen messenger. Have I said that it's called the entity?
I don't think I have.
Okay, so the AI is referred to earlier on as the entity. They say, it's a thing, we'll call it the entity. And part of me goes, please don't call it that, because that is a silly name. And every time they say the entity, slightly cringe, because it is a bit of a silly name, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it is, but it's this kind of film, so they can't call it Brian, can they?
Well, if they had called it Brian. Okay, so my reservations would be that, like I said, there is a bolt together quality to the plot, the set pieces, and the central thing is called the entity, which I think is a bit silly. And then there's a kind of Don't Look Now, so I'll chase through Venice, and then there's a brilliant performance by Pom Klementieff, who is this largely silent assassin called Paris. But what the film does is edge of your seat, nail biting, pulse racing. Blimey, Charlie, I can't believe how exciting this is. And you and I sat there and we watched it, and it's what was it?
It's 2.5 hours, but it genuinely feels like 90 minutes.
Wow. And of course, it's part one. So here's the verdict. Firstly, you get to the end of part 1, you think, I want to watch part 2 right now. I have been here for 2.5 hours and I want to watch part 2 right now. All the action adventure stuff is done. It's really, really well done. I mean, the stuff with the cars chasing through the little streets. I mean, we've seen this stuff many times before, but it's done brilliantly. It's really, really nail biting. When we get to the final sequence, which is the motorbike, parachute, train sequence, and again, if you've seen the trailer, you already know that apparently very early on they said to Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise said to each other, "What do you want to do?" And Tom Cruise said, "I want to drive a motorbike off the edge of a cliff." And Chris McQuarrie said, "I want to do something with a big train." They did both of those things.
He was slightly more explicit.
He was. No, I know. I just don't want to. But it's in
on
the
poster.
Is it okay? Well, so what did he say then?
After Tom Cruise said, "I want to drive a motorbike off a cliff," what do you want to do? Chris McQuarrie said, "I want to crash a train."
Okay, fine. And if you, like me, I mean, Beggars of Life is a film starring Louise Brooks that the Dodge brothers have accompanied for years and years. And Beggars of Life finishes with a train going over the edge of a cliff. And of course, being back then, they got a real train and they really threw it over the edge of a cliff. And you can still go to where that train is. And the wreckage of it is still out there in the desert after all these years. That film was made, like almost a century ago. And the wreckage of the thing is still here. And of course, there is a train sequence in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The finale of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning is, I think, one of the most audaciously tense action set pieces I have ever seen. And you can attest to this, I was genuinely on the edge of my seat. My fingers were digging into the seat. And I was actually thinking, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. Because what it does is it goes and then you do a thing, you go, wow. And then it does a thing and you go, wow. And then it does another thing and you go, wow. And then it does that 8 or 9 times. And I started to hyperventilate. I know that you mentioned this, but I write notes all the way through film. Yeah, so
he's got it. This is a loose leaf book with scribbles because some critics need a torch to. Oh,
I don't do it with. No.
So
because
you just write blind.
I just write. Yeah. So I just have the thing in my lap and I just write as I'm watching the thing, and I use my. It's fine. So I've got 15 pages of notes on it. The very last page of my notes. They might tweet a picture of this. Literally. I can't hold it up to the camera because it's simply an expletive.
About your hat.
Yes. It said, "Fruitcake my hat," scrawled in a trembling hand, that because I was just...
Yes.
And then we both came out of it and we went, wow!
It's completely brilliant.
It's just...
Yes.
I mean, the phrase breathtaking doesn't begin to describe what and all the way through, the action set pieces are good, and the screwball comedy is good, and the caper stuff is good, and the plot is silly, and and the tape self-destructs in 5 seconds, and at one point they go into an analog safety room that is offline because that's where the entity can't get them, and every time somebody says the entity, I slightly quit. Doesn't matter. None of that matters. It is so exciting. It is absolutely thrillingly exciting to the point that I lost the ability to write coherent notes and simply wrote an obscenity.
Do you think the BBC will have a light entity department in the future? Almost certainly they will. Can I just say, I know and this comes up in the interview with Simon Pegg, which you'll hear next week, how incredible. So we're all talking about AI now. It's a bit AI. It's everywhere.
Yeah, but they made this.
This is a pre-COVID conversation.
Yeah.
So Chris McQuarrie was onto this story a long time ago.
No, that's absolutely right.
More Mission Impossible.
Did you tell Simon Pegg that
He asked what you thought, and I said that you'd written that about his hat, and he thought it was hilarious. And within 30 seconds, he told everyone. I wouldn't be surprised if he told Tom Cruise what you want to do with your hat. So we'll find out.
But it was great, wasn't it?
It was absolutely fantastic. Right, let's do this week's listener correspondence.
It opens on Monday. We should say that Mission Impossible opens on Monday.
Mission Impossible opens on Monday. Don't go and see it like on Friday night.
Don't fruitcake your hat before that.
No, exactly.
Because it'll be Dial of Destiny.
So Simon
if you
Pegg,
go on Friday.
Exactly. So correspondence at Kermode.com if you'd like to tell us about stuff that's on, like this, for example.
Hi, Simon. Hi, Mark. I'm Wijun, a filmmaker from Malaysia. My debut film, Hungry Ghost Diner, is making its world premiere at this year's Busan, the Bucheon International Fantastic Film Festival in South Korea, and will subsequently be released in Malaysian cinemas come the 10th of August later this year. Hungry Ghost Diner is a supernatural fantasy family adventure film in the vein of Hong Kong flicks and Spielberg movies from the 80s and 90s. It's horror adjacent but not a scary film at all, and as its name suggests, is set against the backdrop of the Hungry Ghost Festival, which is celebrated by Chinese diaspora worldwide. Hungry Ghost Diner, which is predominantly in Cantonese and Hakka Chinese languages, explores our folk beliefs, ghost mythology, and Chinese food culture.
I want to see Hungry Ghost Diner.
Yes, thanks to Wee Jun Cho, who was, that was great.
That sounds fantastic.
If you're a director, you want to tell us about your film, come on, you can just send us a voice note and send it to
I want to see that.
correspondence at kermodemayo.com. That's the end of take one. This has been a Sony Music Entertainment production. The team was Lily Hambley, Ryan O'Meara, Sancho Panza, Gully Tikel, Scarlett O'Malley, Michael Dale, Hannah Talbot, Simon Poole being the redactor-in-chief. Mark, what is your movie of the week?
Well, look, I love Name Me Lawand. I liked Elemental. But F my H, MI7.
TTFN. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's Take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would.
There you
I
go.
have done.
Excellent.